Hey, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, doing very well, thank you. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. We are here for another blindfold challenge. So Matt is our guest of the week. I was going to say victim, but I don't want to scare him too much before we get started. So yeah, RLME has been our resident blindfold expert. So today Matt's going to get to explore something fun that we just pick. And yeah, what are your thoughts, Matt?
I'm hoping it's not going to be something too crazy, but I'm down for anything, and we'll give it a good go.
Cool. Well, we already have some comments coming in. So Shiva says, hello, good morning. Looking forward to this blindfold challenge. Awesome. Same here. Neil Stud says, ooh, a fresh victim. Be nice, Neil. Be nice. We want Matt to come back. We don't want to. Yeah, so we'll give folks a minute or so to come in. And yeah, I'll do a quick introduction. So I'm Sean Keegan. I'm a developer advocate here at Postman. I'm based in New York City, and I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting. I'm very excited for today. This is my first time hosting the Blindfold Challenge, so I got to pick the one that I wanted to surprise Matt with, and I'm looking forward to today.
Yep, and I'm Matt. I'm part of the solutions engineering team here at Postman. We work to support our customers understand some of the capability and value of the Postman platform. But really excited to mix things up today and try something different.
So Matt, we're already getting some support pouring in. Hannah Neal says, you've got this, Matt. Jettison says, good luck, sirs. John's work alias, a familiar face on the stream, says hi. And then, of course, Claire says, don't go easy on you. So
we've got to have people on both sides.
Exactly. So Matt, one question I wanted to ask before we actually even jump into it. So today we'll be just kind of exploring an API and just playing around. And you kind of hinted at this before, but so what is your normal kind of demos on APIs, and what kind of stuff are you normally talking with folks about?
Most of the time we're really talking about how you would use Postman as a team or as an organization, what it means to collaborate on Postman. A lot of people know Postman as just something that they might use individually. But actually, there's really a huge amount that you can do collectively when you're working together as a team. And there's a lot of supporting tools in Postman around the entire life cycle that kind of adds into that mix as well.
Cool. Awesome. But yeah, as more and more folks come in, we're happy to interact. There's no messages here now, but when they do come through, we'll please ask questions. If Matt gets stuck, certainly provide some thoughts and insights. Even more support, Matt. You are popular already here. So I think before we go ahead and get into the actual meat of everything, I want to talk briefly about some stuff you may have missed. So some things that have recently been announced for Postman. And I will share my screen here. The first thing I want to talk about is the Postman Student Summit. So this is an exciting thing. This is the first time it's ever happening. We'll put our faces in here so you can see it bigger. Yeah, so this weekend we have the first ever Postman Student Summit. I think there's like 800 folks already signed up for it. And really, so anybody is welcome. And it's going to be kind of all things API, so an opportunity to learn a bit about Postman. There'll be some awesome talks. Our CEO, Abhinav, is going to be speaking. We also have our CTO, Ankit, speaking. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be an awesome opportunity to go and learn. So if you want to register, I'll drop that link in the chat. Or Claire, I see that you're in the chat here. So if you wouldn't mind sharing the link for everyone to go ahead and register, I think that'd be awesome. So that was one thing. The other thing I want to talk about is that we recently announced support for Socket.io. And Matt, so this was something, WebSocket support was announced actually a month or so back. And now, so people were asking for Socket.io support, and recently announced it. Matt, you want to touch on this a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I think people are really used to knowing Postman as something that you would use for REST, right? And when it comes to other protocols, maybe not so much. So with the WebSocket release a few months ago, it's really an extension of our capability there. But we didn't just want to support raw WebSockets. So now there's that socket IO capability. You can listen, send to events, and it's still in beta, so there's a lot more to come there that will be really exciting around being able to save those definitions and all the normal Postman goodness stuff of like documentation and stuff. All that's coming down the line as well. So it kind of speaks to a future where we are going to start supporting even more types of protocols as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we're always open to feedback. We've got opportunities for that. In the past, our community forum has been a great place where we solicit feedback on various features that we've newly released. So that's certainly a place where you can go and provide feedback on various things. So that's it. So I think that's all I've got for in case you missed it. So should we jump into it, Matt?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do the big reveal. So, do you have any guesses? Have you thought of any that you think might have come up, or you're just open to whatever?
I'm pretty much open to whatever. I'm guessing it's going to be something that I've heard of, but you never know. It could just be some company or API I've never heard of before, and that'll make it even more interesting, I guess. But let's see.
Yeah. Okay. So, drum roll, the big reveal. It is going to be, so John's work alias suggests Twitter chatbot. It is not that, but if other folks have other guesses, I'm curious. I guess a hint I can give is that if you look at our featured workspaces, you may have seen this. So that's a little bit of a hint for anybody that follows along on our featured page. Matt, are you checking it out now and see if you can get a jump start?
Yeah, I mean, I could look and try and cheat here, but I don't know how far ahead I'm going to get
now. Joyce says Matt is British and she sees a guitar. Can confirm? Yeah. Kanye REST API. I actually like that. Is that an actual thing, Claire? Do you know? Or Matt, do you
know? Given the internet, I would say that there's always a possibility.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So it actually is probably, I don't know if you're going to have heard of it. It's the Lob API, LOB. Does that ring a bell at all?
It does not. No.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You got me.
Gotcha. Cool. So is, and I think the best move, I'll just share. Well, no, I'm not gonna spoil it. I'll let Matt do all the organic searching himself. But so Lob, if you're not familiar, they have a suite of APIs that allow you to automate mailing and address checking, part of the like mail process. And so pretty cool API. They recently got added to the public API network. They created a workspace, have an awesome video kind of showing you how to go through it. And yeah, I don't want to give too much more away because I kind of want Matt to just like go to the public workspace and, or excuse me, maybe it exists, I don't know. But just check out how we can explore the Lob API because I think there's some really cool things you can do with it. And I'll surprise him with some challenges along the way and ask him to do some other cool things as we get going.
All right.
How does that sound, Matt?
Sounds good. Let's get started.
Cool. So I'm going to pull Matt's screen up so we can all see it. And Matt, you want to just give a quick overview of the page you're on and what you're going through here?
Yeah. So here we're just looking at Postman as you would land on it when you're coming to use the platform. So for me, I'm part of a team. So this page, a lot of it is made up of things that are happening in the team, like an activity feed, the different workspaces that we're using, and there's different ways to navigate around the team to see like APIs that we have internally and the workspaces where we're collaborating together. So this is really just the launch pad for navigating you into the appropriate place of what you need to find in Postman. But really what we're going to want today is not something that's internal to my team and what I normally do day to day within Postman. I want to pull in someone else's API, right? And so Postman has this explore view and the public network up at the top toolbar here. So this is really the entry point in my mind for me to come and discover a new API. So my first thought would be, given you gave it away to me a little bit, I'm going to come in and take a look at some of the featured workspaces here and just see if they're in the list.
So they might. I'm actually not sure if they're currently on the list, but I do like this searching. This is an awesome way to just kind of show some of the featured workspaces and teams that we do have. But yeah, I'll let you keep kind of exploring and seeing what goes on or like what this area is.
Yeah, I mean, even if they're not featured, one way that potentially I might be able to find it is through some of these categories on the left here. So if I could, I'm not entirely sure what they might fit into category-wise when it comes to figuring things out. So, normally I think we're just going to end up defaulting to let's like search here, right, to see what we can throw up. So this probably looks like a pretty good guess to me because I can see this is like a public workspace. It's Lob, so that's broadly what I'm looking for. And when I get through to it, I'm going to have a pretty good idea if this is fully built out, contains all the information I need and such.
Cool. Yeah, I love seeing that search process. I think that a lot of people either are going to work internally and stick to the things they have in Postman. But I think that Explore page is such a cool resource that folks can find. One, just learning resources, right? Like if you want to learn various things or learn about an API, or just discover a totally new one. Like I've gone on there and just found APIs and forked them into my workspace and just messed around with them. And it's just really kind of a cool thing that we have is the public API network.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you end up in one of these workspaces, there might be a collection here which, in this case, it looks like it represents the API at a surface level. You're going to find workspaces of all different shapes and sizes, right? So some workspaces will have lots of collections in there that will kind of like describe different use cases and workflows that you might be able to do with the API. So it's not just going to be about like, oh, here's a single collection which represents everything the API has to offer. Actually, you might find a collection that more closely represents what you're trying to achieve and gives you an even further head start into making those requests or building out what you need to do.
Yeah. And I love Matt. Like this is legitimately Matt's first time hearing about this and going to this workspace and hearing about Lob. So I think it's kind of cool that you can see their folder structured in a way that kind of gives you an idea of maybe some of the functionality. And yeah, so again, Matt, I'll just let you kind of explore and kind of wrap your head around, what's going on here.
Yeah. So I think the thing that makes most sense to do would just be to like click on this get started link. So that's kind of neat. It seems like that's just basically launching me into the documentation view of the collection. So actually probably internally we could think about, how do you arrive at that sooner, right? Because ordinarily you kind of have to go into the collection and open up the documentation view and it takes some time. So, I like that this collection documentation is readily accessible.
I know Matt, Kevin is suggesting you try the bank account API. No secrets could possibly be revealed there.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, mine might be pretty boring. I don't know if there's much to see in there, but I've got Slack open. If you want to send me through your details, maybe we could try yours. So
folks that are watching too, like if you as Matt goes through, if you have suggestions for things, right now we're just kind of looking, but if something piques your interest, certainly let us know in the chat, and Matt can take your advice and see what he can do.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing, it looks like we're going to have to get some API keys here. So I'm kind of one of those folks who doesn't necessarily want to read the entire thing before I get started. I'm just going to take each instruction as it shows up. So I'm thinking I'm going to create this account here to provision a key.
So yeah, I can confirm you are going to have to sign up. So if you are interested in following along at home, you will have to sign up for an API key. But it is quite quick, and yeah, like it's just going to be you'll see as Matt goes through it. But yeah, if you want to follow along at home, that's where Matt is right now, just signing up for an API key.
All right. So I think, based on the context you gave me, well, at least I remember the address piece anyway, more than the automating mail.
Yeah, Matt, would you mind zooming in one time here?
Yeah. Let me do that. Sorry. Hopefully this is a bit better.
Yeah, this is great.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know if this is actually going to affect what I'm able to do with the API. I guess not. But I'm going to say that the verify and enrich addresses. Okay. So we've got a whole other getting started piece in here if we need it. Now I have this account. I'm just going to come back to Postman to see what it describes as the next steps. So we need to fork this collection at some point. That's the usual behavior for taking anything from a public workspace in order to actually really be able to play around with it. You can't do that in the public workspace itself. You need to take your own copy. This is a pretty familiar workflow to most to most things. If you're playing around with like repos in Git and stuff, you'll be forking and going about it that way. So it's really the same in Postman. And then we need to worry about environment variables. So I see. So it's also suggesting that we can fork the environment. So we can see one in here as well. Okay, cool. So what I think I'll do just for the purpose of today is actually create a new workspace for me to be able to put all of this stuff in without kind of clogging it up with things that I'm doing day to day or other projects. All right, so now I have that workspace. I'm then just gonna back up to that Lob public workspace. And now I should be pretty much set in terms of walking it. Bring it into that workspace I just created. I'm gonna call this getting started or something. I'll grab the collection and then I can do the same thing with the environment as well. This navigates me into the workspace itself, kind of assuming that I want to get started right away, which probably ordinarily I would, but actually I want to grab the environment as well, so I'm going to go back again and grab that.
So yeah, Matt, what's the benefit of forking this environment here?
So yeah, if we take a look at the environment here, we can see this, like there's some pre-configured variables in here that I'm going to need. So I guess Lob provides me with a test API key and a live API key. And the collection has been pre-configured to work with these variable names. So rather than me creating the environment and copy pasting these exact key names, if I fork the environment, then I just have that already and I can build on top of it. So it just feels like a bit of a quicker approach than crafting it myself.
Cool.
So again, I'll pick that workspace. Just call this one getting started as well for consistency, and fork the environment.
All
Okay.
right.
So what we have now is this workspace. I've got the environment across. I can see that that's my fork of it, and I look at my collections and I can see this fork as well here. And I don't necessarily need to go back to that public workspace now. I've got a full copy of everything here, right? A Postman collection is made up of lots of stuff. It's the request itself, but it can also be this documentation. So the guide I've been following thus far is still here. So whilst I'm working and extending and changing this collection, I can have this documentation open here without having to change workspaces and stuff all the time.
Yeah, I think one thing that I really appreciated when I was going through Lob's public workspace in this collection is that this information and the kind of instructions for how to go about it are in the collection. And so like you're saying, you don't have to go back and forth. Whereas if they had everything in the public workspace, you would have to maybe go back and forth between two different tabs and follow on that way. So I really appreciated it being kind of documented here.
Yeah, 100%. And just having the documentation inside the collection, for me, it's way less context switching. If I'm inside one of these requests, then if I'm changing tabs and looking over here, like, yeah, sometimes it's going to be necessary, but if I can find it all in one window, it's just a little bit more convenient.
Totally.
Okay. So here we're talking about updating the environment to contain, the actual keys. So it doesn't say this, but I'm guessing this is going to be available to me in here. So I noticed this section of get your API keys here. I don't know if this is I always used to see Alamy bring up the secret screen. Is that something we need for this? Or is are we worried about these keys? Or I don't know if there's... Oh, there they are.
There they are, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like a rite of passage to have them leaked. So it's, yeah, but you can also pull it off screen for a second and copy it if you need, but I don't think it's, the biggest deal if it does unfortunately get leaked.
Just given Kevin's earlier message, I'm kind of worried. Okay, let's get into this. So
Claire saying she won't look. Arlene saying that it comes with a price. Yeah.
This is interesting. They have two types of keys. So there's this test mode and live mode, which equates to what I'm seeing in the environment, but they have publishable and secret. So I don't know if there's permission differences between these or not, but given we're playing around more publicly, let's try these publishable ones, I guess. So let's copy the test one, go to our environment, and then we'll include that here.
So Matt, you very much got the let me get some information, let me plug it in and just get going, as opposed to like, oh, let me read the documentation thoroughly and see if I can find the exact right key. Right? You're more of like, let me just get this first call in.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if there was more options, then I might consider reading a bit further. But I'm more like, try it, see if it works, and if it doesn't work, try the other one. But documentation seems to be there for me when I get stuck. Or there's times that you have to. I don't know anything about Lob or what's possible here, so we're still having to go through this like getting started guide. At least there's no point in me scratching my head and looking through the collection to find out how they've named things and stuff. Like that would be slower. But I'm very much for like break stuff and then try and fix it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a quick question here? So I noticed you only entered in these values in the current value. I'm going to do a quick reason or description of initial versus current and what you need here.
Yeah, sure. So the naming of these can be a little bit confusing between initial and current, but really it's just trying to follow best practice and having a good habit here. So when you include a value in the initial value column, that's actually synced to Postman's cloud. And if we're working within like a team workspace, a public workspace, that means that everyone else sees that value. So if you've set up an environment and you've got something in there like a URL that's not sensitive, then fine, whatever, you want to share it. But in the case when we're dealing with something like an API key or any other secret sensitive information, I want to keep that to just myself and only on my machine.
And the people watching at home, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little redundant in this case, shall we say, because we're live streaming this. But if you all weren't there, this would be the best practice to follow to make sure that it's just me that has this key, and for everyone else in my team or everyone else publicly, they actually need to go over to this Lob dashboard like I did and provision the key for themselves and be working with their own rather than playing around with my API key and getting me into trouble.
So one other question from Kevin. What's the reason I might design my developer experience to have a test mode versus live mode?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you've got an API which actions something, it could be something as simple as sending an email, right? I think we've seen a few of these slip-ups more publicly recently, where a couple of companies have sent out an email that says like, "Oh, this is a test email," and people are like, "So I meant to receive this," and then you see it trending on Twitter, right? This is kind of a good reason to have like a test mode and a live mode. So you can build out your entire integration, whatever it is you're trying to develop, and use the test key and know that whatever you do, that's not actually going to hit an end user or have some kind of effect on a production system effectively. And then when you get to the point of going live, you might have a number of configuration changes that you have to make. And I guess having the need to actually change the API key is another another key that you have to turn in order to action that. I like how they've also included live and test in the actual value itself, because all too often they look the same, and that doesn't necessarily help, and you don't realize what you're using. So, I mean, those are some of my thoughts on it. I'm sure everyone in the chat also could probably add a lot more detail to why this is a really good practice to have. But those would be my thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you in the chat, if you're just joining now, Matt is going through the lob.com or Lob's API, and it's totally new to him. And we're in the process of setting it up so that so Matt can go ahead and make some API calls. Yeah, if you're not familiar, Lob helps you automate sending mail, does address verification, and a bunch of other things. So that's our goal right now, is just getting everything set up so Matt can get going on that. So Matt, one more quick question actually. So Matt says, can you show where to find the API keys? So I think that's Shiva might be referring to where in lob.com to get them. Shiva, if I'm understanding correctly, Matt, maybe you could just show like in Lob's dashboard where those exist again.
Yeah, for sure. So just, if you've been following along and you click this link to get the account from the documentation that exists here, once you go through that, you land on this getting started page. If you scroll down a little on the right-hand side here, there's this get your API keys tile. I clicked on that, and that's where all the keys are. So hopefully that helps and also gives you another good look at my keys.
Perfect. Cool. All right. I feel like we're getting close to our first call here.
I think so, yeah. So now that we've got the environment, we've got to make sure that it's selected. So, they're showing here that you can click this drop down and pick the environment. You can also click this little tick if you're in the environment list to set the active environment, which I never do, but since I'm looking at it, I thought I'd give that little Easter egg. So that should mean we're good to go now, right? I think. Like when we scroll down, it says we can start exploring, and here's where the full docs are. And then we really get into this breakdown of, request by request, which we can kind of see as we step through the collection anyway over here.
Yeah, so it seems like we're all set. So why don't we, I think, yeah, if you want to just kind of poke around and see what kind of comes up.
Yeah, I'm just going to hit send here and see what happens.
I love it.
Okay. The publishable API key cannot be used to authenticate with this endpoint. Okay, so what API keys did we use again? So we've got the test and the live one. And then how is the authentication actually set up here? It's inheriting it from the collection. Nope. Okay. Is this just like a header or something? Oh, maybe it's...
Go
ahead. Okay. So this looks like where the author's configured. So this is pulling in the test API key. So that's seems like it's set up as we would want. But actually, like a publishable key, does that? Okay, publishable secret. Okay, so I'm gonna have to use one of the secret ones. So this is literally the thing I was talking about, where we'll see if it works, and if it doesn't, then we'll come and fix it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get back to our environment and grab the actual keys that will hopefully work.
Yeah, I think, it's probably like a frustrating thing to deal with when you're live and people are watching, but this is very much like I think authentic, organic experience that folks go through. It's like, I just want to enter this stuff in and make a first call. But thankfully they had like a helpful error message, and I think it helped guide you towards like what did you need to change, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, it kind of it clicked in my head, and potentially. Okay. So no, I don't think it actually. It would have been really easy for me to have just glossed over it, saying make sure you use the publishable ones. But potentially, this is like a reason why it can be really handy to make sure you include some of these like low-level details in your documentation, because it just reduces the friction and time that it takes me to make my first request and get a 200.
Well, we did it. There's our first one.
Yep. And it seems to be what I would expect. So I picked something that was just a get, because they're usually less friction to set up. I'm not trying to create anything. I'm just trying to retrieve something, and it's trying to list all addresses, but given I haven't used Lob before, it makes sense that I wouldn't actually have any addresses. So this seems, even though there's nothing here, this seems good to me. Like, I feel like the rest of the collection is going to work now.
Yeah. So this is, when I was playing with it, Matt, I went through the same thing. I'm trying to figure out, which API key do I use? And I have a similar process of like, let me just get a successful 200. And I think the GET requests are going to be the easiest way to do that. So I think if you wanted to, what would you, if you're just still exploring, if folks in the chat have an idea of what they want Matt to do, I've got some ideas of where we guide them and things to do now that we have like, our first successful 200.
Yeah. I'm happy to be guided by chat, or we can dive into one of these folders, whichever seems most interesting.
So I think I think that's going to be a pretty intriguing one to folks watching, like Kevin suggested earlier, that bank accounts folder.
Yeah.
But I think this one might require, like I know for Lob's APIs, there are some endpoints that require like a credit card on file, because you can do some pretty real world stuff, right? Like actually sending mail and doing things.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So we can play around and see what happens. I think one thing that's cool is the address verification folder. There's some cool things in there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I think, so I mean, these are post requests. Matt, I mean, you kind of hinted at this before, but the difference between, get and post requests, if you had to summarize it in a sentence or so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at a really, like if I was trying to explain it to just someone on the street, I'd say normally, like when you're making a GET request, you're retrieving information from something, whereas when you make a POST request, typically you're sending information somewhere. That could be for the purposes of anything like a login through to trying to create something new within a system, right? So like up here, we can see that a POST request creates a new address within Lob, but a GET request retrieves those addresses. So that's kind of that kind of falls in line with the general explanation there.
Cool. So Matt, I'm going to pull up my screen for a second, and I think it'll make sense why. So I'm going to switch here. So I pulled up the Postman company homepage on our contact us page. And you can see, get in touch with us, view open positions. We are hiring, by the way. So if you are, interested in any jobs or any roles look interesting, check them out. Then we see here, we have our San Francisco headquarters office. Why don't we see what we can do and see if see if anything with this address pops up in using Lob.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'm gonna take my screen back off. Joyce wants us to verify my home address.
So let's get to Postman. This was on the contact page, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that's down here. And
Hannah confirming that we are indeed hiring and encouraging folks to join us.
This would probably take way too long, but we could get like super fancy here and actually retrieve these tiles through Postman and using test scripts and stuff. But let's save that for another time. But there's the Cheerio library, which is good for parsing HTML and Postman. So I kind of like this. I mean, we can verify. Okay, let's do the verifying the address first. But I'm also really interested to try this autocomplete one. Like if I only give it a part of the Postman address, if it can get the rest. Okay, so again, if we want to verify an address, that probably means we need to actually send the address through. And typically that kind of information sits within the request body, so that's why I've defaulted to looking there. And we can see without going to the documentation that actually there's, we can see here within the line-by-line descriptions which are the things we're going to need to include and which ones we don't have to worry about so much.
That's something I really appreciate, like not having to go, again, we talk about the context switching, right? Like you don't have to go back to their docs and see which ones are required parameters. You can just see right here, which is really nice.
Yeah. That said, it is throwing me a little bit, just because I can see that it's saying that this address is required, but the default state they've left the collection in is that it's not checked. So I'm like, okay, is it required? Is it not? There's not a value filled in there, whereas it looks like maybe a zip code is required as well, but there's no description. So maybe I'll just send their default one to see. Okay, I must have a verified email. Let me pull up my emails.
Yeah. So while Matt's doing this, I will give a shout out to Sid over at Lob. He was the person I spoke with over there about getting the public workspace set up. He was all about it, made it happen pretty quickly. And so Sid, if you're watching, I think it's probably pretty helpful to see some of the the things that Matt's talking about as he goes through live. Yeah, like that was a bit tricky. It's like, yeah, is it required? Is it not? What's default? But yeah, so a shout out to Sid for getting this up and being so helpful.
Yeah, top job. I really like how well named a lot of these requests are as well. I've seen many a Postman collection where requests are just the URL or aren't very descriptive of what the request does. Whereas these are super descriptive and help way more than just if I only had the path name. So that just, it helps you understand so much more quickly what I'm going to expect from this endpoint.
And actually, I can confirm Sid is here watching. This is great user testing, Matt. So this is, awesome. Yeah. Good to see you, Sid.
So I'm going to take some of these details from the San Francisco office. And, I could see that we had a successful request here with the default values. But let's just see if I update some of these things. So if we go to 55 Second Street and then we take Postman zip. Wow, barely, our offices must be close together. There's only 2 away. Yeah, let's see if when we send this, then the details that we get within the response match up with what we have on the website as our own address. Cool. So it looks like it.
So one thing I think that's really cool with what this response gives us is if you scroll back up a little bit, it talks about it being a commercial building. It says like undeliverable, which means, right, like we couldn't send mail to 55 2nd Street. But it gives us a little bit more information, right? And now we can kind of, this is like what we're talking about is, does it match up with what was on the website? So we may be missing something here if we wanted to send mail.
Yes. Yeah. So there's the suite, right? As much as we might like to wish we don't have an entire building for Postman just yet. So we're just a part of that building. So what'd be interesting here is it says, so it's saying it's undeliverable and missing unit. So I wonder if this corresponds to any of these components below. Like, could we ascertain, like we know that it's missing the suite number, but I'm wondering if there's a clear indicator within this response that would let us know that that's the kind of thing that's missing.
So yeah, like there's missing unit, like I think of unit, something like in my New York City buildings, they talk about unit 3 or unit 3A. So yeah. that might be a UK states thing here.
yeah. Clicked as soon as, because like when I think of unit, I'm thinking like unit of measurement.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now.
So you guys call them flats, right? It's do you say like my flat number is that a thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I should know better, having been in the States for like 18 months, but yeah, okay. So that makes a lot of sense. I wonder, like, where do we, maybe if we included that on the secondary line, if that was change our response.
That's Kevin's suggestion as well.
Okay. Okay, so let's grab suite 300 and put that on our secondary line, and we need to enable that line because otherwise it won't send with it. Hit send now. Okay, yeah.
Deliverable.
Perfect. What's kind of cool about this is this is just useful from ensuring you have like exactly the right address, right? I know there was like a couple of times for some really rare occasions when I was in the US, I needed this part of the zip. I was like, how on earth do I find that?
Yeah.
But also sometimes just formatting can be strange if you're not familiar with the location or what the format should be. So it's kind of cool to see it like this.
Yeah, I was actually playing with it for this exact reason. Like I just moved to a new building and my address is, I won't say the full address. So, but the number portion of it is 292A is the actual like number. And so instead of 55 2nd, it's like 292A blah, blah, blah. But it changed and it used to be like, that's the new address. It used to be 292 and a half. And so it was very odd. And when I was trying to set up my utilities and try to set up my mail forwarding, the post office was like 292A is not a thing. And so it was actually going through here and using Lob's API to verify like what is the address and how is it, like which address is deliverable was actually really cool and helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's actually, I don't even know how this works under the hood, but I think it's amazing to think of the infrastructure that makes all of this work, right? When we go and build a whole new housing estate and all of the, like, who creates those addresses in the first place? Where does that feed in? And then all of the, I guess it probably comes from the post office holds that central record and then people update from it. But it's pretty impressive the level that we've gotten to nowadays.
Platform 9 3/4. Let's see if there's deliverable there. But so we can confirm that the Postman office is a deliverable place if you have the right suite. So if you want to send us I don't know, a nice piece of mail, here's how to do it, I suppose.
Not all that many people in the office at the moment, but
that's true. Yeah, it might go unseen for a decent amount of time, but
yeah.
So, okay, cool. Matt, we have done the first challenge that I had. So we got let's just recap, right? So for folks that are either just joining or wasn't sure what happened, well, Hannah says she pops into the office from time to time. So if you send a postcard, Hannah will get it. And fun fact, you can use the Lob API to send postcards, which we may or may not explore in a little bit. But so while we do this quick recap here, so Matt has signed up for a Lob account, figured out which of the API keys to use, forked the Lob public workspace and collection, or forked the collection rather, into a workspace on his own that he could, actually use and consume the Lob API. And then played around, and we made a few successful requests using the API, and we verified an address. Is that a pretty fair summary?
I think you've got it spot on, yeah.
Cool. So the next thing I was thinking would be kind of cool is that was fun. It was nice to see, does the address online actually match up with what the post office will be able to deliver mail to? Is it deliverable? I think that was pretty cool. And then I tried to think of some actual real world use cases, like when would this be valuable? And so I was imagining a situation where, you're a company and you have, I don't know, a bunch of, customers or people that you're trying to get to be a customer, and you want to send out, mail to them, but you don't know. It's it's going to be a waste of your time. It's going to be a waste of your money to send things to people or to places that are not deliverable.
Got it.
Yeah. And so what I've done is Matt and I did talk. The only preview Matt had for what we may be doing today was that I told him there'd be a file with a bunch of contacts and addresses. And so what I was hoping he could do is show us how we could take some sort of file, like a CSV file, and use that and use Postman to kind of go through programmatically and see, maybe get a list of various addresses that are not or are deliverable.
Yeah, got it. Okay, it's starting to click now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. The main thing that we're going to have to do here is make use of.
I'm going to pull your screen back up here, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah. The main thing that we're going to have to do here, right, is make use of our runner, because that's where we can bring in a CSV file, and it will just detect how many rows are in the CSV, and then that will kind of set up how many iterations we're going to do. And then I could either, I could either fork the collection again for this use case, or I can just run a single part of the collection.
So Matt, I don't follow there. Why would you fork the collection again?
Well, we see collections being put together for a lot of different purposes, right? This collection here, as I'm looking at it, I feel is like a complete reference to Lob's API. What you've just described to me is like a use case or a workflow that I want to achieve with Lob's API. And it might be the next week, if I actually do a good job of this, you'll be like, hey, Matt, I've got something else for you. And if that pattern continues and I'm trying to jam this all into one collection, it's probably going to make it, potentially, it might make it a little bit harder for me to separate concerns from these different tasks. So, I have an entire workspace here. So I could just fork the collection again and start to just strip it down to the pieces that I am most interested in. So if a specific use case or workflow is really only going to revolve around like the address verifications, then I might want to delete other parts of the collection just to keep it simpler and cleaner. And then I could even come in and start to change like the documentation and move it away from this API reference and describe what I've been doing in order to accomplish this workflow. Be like, oh, hey, I've got this list of addresses, and so I started putting together the collection in this way. Having said all of this, my first thought was like, oh, we're going to have to run this request a bunch of times, right? And then I looked down and saw verify in bulk, a list of addresses. So this might be the quicker way. It might not. So I'm going to have to think about like how do we best abstract the information from the CSV in order to feed it into Postman.
So I don't want to get your hopes up too much, Matt, but I believe we won't be able to do the verify in a bulk list endpoint without like an actual paid membership. So yeah, I think it may be kind of showcasing the workflow of like repeating a request here.
All right, let's do it. It's good that we have options.
Yeah. So initially I had created a list of about 2,000 addresses, and I just got them from like a public record available for just like real estate transactions. And so we've hosted that. I'm happy to share it, but I've kind of minimized the file, and just so that we don't run through 3,000 iterations, we can do like 15 or something like that, just so it's a little bit more manageable for the demo purposes. So I'm going to pull our screens off, our faces off here for a second. But yeah, so I think Matt maybe showing like how we can go from a CSV file to like running a request several times, I think would be awesome. And I'm actually going to go through. So I'll share my screen here. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
So here is the file that I have found. And so I don't know what any of these places are. They're just like real estate transactions. And I'm going to change a few of these a little bit just to see if we get something funky in here. Let's say like, and I honestly don't know how like sensitive the API is, where it's like, if this is wrong, like what it'll give back to us. Let's say we change the zip code to a Manhattan one, or a Brooklyn one rather. What else? Anything else that I should mess up here? Let's see what that happens. So I save this, and we can share this file for folks that want to play around with it. I'm going to send this to Matt right now. I should have done it before, but I'm going to send it over now, so we can really see Matt going with some live stuff here.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. So I am sending this over. Okay. All right. So as Joyce had said, this is a tricky one. So hopefully we can kind of do some cool stuff. So Matt, you should have gotten the thing over through Slack.
Okay. Guessing let me take the most recent one.
Yeah.
So let's just get this over here. It looks like I feel like you're trying to trip me up already, because it looks like you've it's a dot numbers file, which is like some kind of Mac format.
Let me take a fresh one. So it's not, that was not my intention.
Yeah, I don't think we can, I don't think the runner takes that. If it's the CSV, then it should be fine.
Cool. Yep. I'll export it quickly to a CSV file. Cool. CSV. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. So for those watching at home, yeah, like I'm on a Mac, and so my initial process was creating this file, and it became a numbers file, which is harder to work with, which is just like Mac specific. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it can be, I think the formats we support are JSON and CSV, but collection runs are pretty configurable. So you could also just retrieve the data that you want to loop through from an endpoint instead of doing this. But this is like the easiest and built-in method.
So there is one last thing at the end. So if we have time at the end, I think so somebody suggested that we could do the postcard part of this, which I think is a fun part of the Lob API as well. But let's see if we can't work with a file here and try to verify addresses. Addresses. That is a tough word to say.
Bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah. So Matt, what are you doing on the other screen now?
I'm just waiting to see if you're gonna send me a CSV instead of. Or do you want me to convert?
I see. No, I see what happened. I sent it to the wrong person. I now realized. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you were like messing around and trying to format it in a certain way to get ahead of the game here.
No. I'm not trying to jumpstart or anything.
Yeah. Cool. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I just sent Matt over the actual CSV file.
Cool. Yeah, I've got it now. So I'm gonna bring that over just so I've got it in the right place. Okay. So I wonder if can Chrome actually handle a CSV? Or is Chrome not into CSVs? No, I guess not. It would have been cool to just have it all open in the same window.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. I'm going to need to zoom this in a little bit.
Please.
So we've got this CSV, and what I'm most interested in at the moment is the kind of the titles for the columns here, because that's what we were just filling in order to verify an address, right? So we put in, what was it, 55 Second Street for the Postman address. Yeah. Yep. So I feel like at minimum I'm gonna need that. So I'm going to need the street. I'm going to need to plug that in. The zip. City, I don't know if we actually need, but maybe we can just throw it in anyway, as well as state, just to see. So I think we want to make use of the first 4 columns here. And what's going to happen when we use this runner and when we select this this data file here. Oh, actually, I didn't even need to use VS Code, did I? We have our own preview thing. That would have been so much better. So this gives me an overview of the data, but when I select a CSV in Postman, when it starts doing the collection run and going through this stuff, it's going to create data variables for me with these names. So like we might normally create an environment or collection variable called street or city or zip, that's going to happen automatically just because we're bringing in a data file. So I basically just need to pay attention to these names and transplant that into my request. So let's see. The primary line here, this is going to be our street. So we use that familiar double curly brace syntax. We don't want suite 300, and I'm not sure we want the secondary line at all based on the data we have. But city, state, and zip we're going to include. And it was pretty much formatted like this, I think.
So all of these variables should be like unresolved until it actually runs through each iteration, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So if we just tried to send this now, we're going to get...
It's like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, nothing, right? Because these basically resolve to nothing. But it should be the case that when we're using the runner here, it creates variables with these names. So we can see we've got 19 rows here. So what I would expect, we see there's 19 iterations. So it means for the request that I select here, it will run that request as many times as we see iterations. So we could just, before we kind of get to the end goal here of actually maybe knowing which address is good or bad, we could at least just try and select this verification request and try and run this just to see what happens, see if we get a bunch of requests that work and the whole thing doesn't just fall over, I guess.
Just putting our names to the side so we can get a better visual of what we're looking at in the runner here.
Okay. So I'm gonna hit run. I'm assuming that we sometimes we might want to put a delay in here. So like even with our own API, Postman's API, once you're doing over like 60 requests, you need to think about putting a delay in here so you don't get rate limited. I could go and look at Lob's documentation to find out about that, but I think we're probably going to be fine just running 19 calls like this. So let's hit run and see what happens.
I'm glad we condensed it from 3,000 to 19 because I don't think they would have loved 3,000 requests coming in one shot.
Yeah, we might have crashed something. So yeah, in general, this early indication seems to be that this went okay, right? So each request sent and we got 200 okay. We could start diving in here to see, did the information that we expect feed through appropriately? So sometimes folks are like, oh, and I do the collection run, like there's no, like, how do I keep track of things? And it's kind of a little bit hidden, but click on the request name and then you can dive into all the detail you're used to. So I can see it looks like the information passed through as I would expect, right? It's populated appropriately. And if I go on to the next request, I'd hope that the details are different.
Are different, yeah.
Still showing up correct. So it seems like, kind of seems like that's what's happening here. What we're not getting an idea of yet is, like we can't see the response here. So we're not getting an idea of like what the Lob API actually said about, okay, was this address deliverable, right? So we need to think about what can we do to help understand that within our collection run.
So yeah, I mean, if folks in the chat have ideas, I'm sure Matt knows the next logical place to kind of test this. But yeah, we'd love to know what folks are thinking. Looks like Neil Stud may have an idea. It'd be great to have a test which passes, right, if it's deliverable. And Matt, I have to imagine this is where you were going.
Yeah, pretty much. That's Postman's so good at testing. It seems like the most logical step forward.
Yeah, I mean, Neil calls himself out here as a tester, so yeah, of course his brain went there.
I've actually shot myself in the foot a little bit here because the last time I ran this request on its own, I got this error. So to construct the test, I actually want to see what the response looks like of this request. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to craft. But it kind of looks like Lob have included some good examples here. So it might be that I can just study this to understand what those keys and values look like in order to make sense of it.
Yeah, I mean this is a great kind of point for folks, API designers, right, and API publishers. Like, documentation can be so valuable, and having these examples in there just make the workflow easier, and you don't have to now go back and change it and make another sample request so you can see it. It's like having these examples is super valuable, so you can get an idea of what you need.
Mm-hmm. So deliverability is what I really care about here. So I'll copy that key name, and let's see if we can write a test to evaluate this. So rather than go from scratch, let's use the tools that are given to us. So I want to do a JSON value check, so I can click on this little snippet on the right-hand side to get the code. And really what I'm trying to verify here is that the address is deliverable. And the key that I want to check is deliverability. And I'm expecting it to say, based on the example behavior that Lob have provided, I'm expecting it to say deliverable. So what this test case should do here is each time this request goes around, we're doing this little check to actually see whether the response body had this key and the value was set to deliverable.
Yeah, these test snippets are quite handy, right? Like, Matt didn't really have to write any custom tests. He just kind of plugged and played the values that he wanted. So if you haven't seen those before, definitely recommend checking out the test snippets. It's a highly useful way to get some testing without even if you didn't know JavaScript, Matt, I think you might be able to kind of figure out a little bit of where you need to pop in the pieces you need.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even here, it's not really JavaScript that you need to understand if you can make sense of a little bit of JSON, right? So, if it was the primary number we were trying to verify, just knowing that dot notation, knowing that, okay, you need to do components, period, primary underscore number, and that would be the path to the thing you want to check, then yeah, it's really plug and play. Something that I wouldn't normally think to do this when doing tests, but just for the sake of what we're trying to achieve here, I might actually bring in this primary line here of the address, and I'm thinking about gluing it to the front of this test name, just because what's going to happen when we run the collection is we're going to get some tests pass, some fail, but we won't necessarily know what address it's associated with. So we could kind of actually bring the address into the test name to make it more visible. But I won't do it yet, just because there are some kind of other ways that we can tackle that, and this is an option we can execute. So, yeah, let's go back to the collection run and see what happens if we run it again.
I do like this forward thinking, like planting the seeds for having this become, a more kind of robust testing environment here.
Yeah, let's run this and see what happens. Cool. So here we can start to see something a bit more useful happening. So we've got 17 addresses which were good, where the address was deliverable, and then we've got 2 addresses where it seems like maybe they're a commercial address again, and if maybe unit can also relate to an apartment or something. So this is a case where we didn't quite have enough information to complete the address, or I don't know exactly how you malformed it. Something's up with this piece of the address, right?
Yeah.
But what we don't know now is, okay, great, Matt, 2 of the addresses aren't deliverable, but which ones?
Yeah.
So there are a few hints here, right? Like iteration 6, iteration 16. So I could go back to my CSV. I could find row 6, 16, but it's a little bit sketchy doing that. You've got the whole, like, if something's 0 indexed or whatever, how do you guarantee it? Or you accidentally sort your CSV depending on how you've opened it.
And it also just seems like if you have tools like Postman available, right? Like that is it's a 3,000 line file, or 400 failed, right? Any of these situations are going to be like, that is not a reasonable way to go about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't scale. But I guess again, depending on how we're trying to report on this or get this information, we can come and look at the request body again. So that helps us identify which address it is that's wrong, right? This is really useful here. Where this might start to fall down is if we wanted to somehow run this on a more automated basis, if you kind of start to blow this up, right, and start thinking about some of the scale, how do you make sure that that address is always going to be visible, right? So depending on what you're doing, it might be a case of, if it isn't deliverable, logging out the address through the scripts. It might be something like what I was suggesting, right? So we could extract that response data so we could use it anywhere. And we could attach the primary line to the front of the test name here and just change our test here. So saying address is deliverable would assume all of them are going to pass. So this isn't quite the right phrasing. But I'm just going to run with it for now.
For now, yeah.
Yeah.
So Matt, Neil had an idea too. You can opt to save responses when starting the collection runner. Though he likes the name idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can save the responses. It also actually, depending on your settings, it also might go into your history as well when you're running through this. Yeah, now like when we look at our failures, kind of reads a bit confusingly. Maybe we could just depending on what we were doing, we could just cut out this whole second piece altogether. But now, without diving any deeper, we can actually like see that like a piece of the address and understand what's going on here. So sometimes it's nice to just be able to change your test name dynamically, but really depends on what you're testing and what you're plugging it into.
Yeah, I had never thought to like put in dynamic variables or just like dynamic stuff to the test name. Like, so that was cool to see. So I think, Matt, we've got a handful of minutes left. This has been awesome so far. Let's say the last thing we wanted to do was, all right, let's say I'm a dentist, right? And I like to send out postcards to all my patients. And I just went through this process. I have like 18 or 19 folks on my distribution list, and I got their information, and then I ran these tests and said, all right, like these are the 17 that are like viable. How would you kind of set a workflow to then take it, from these tests, and when it's successful, to then go ahead and create a postcard for them?
Yeah.
I know it might not like fully flesh it out, but you could just kind of like talk about it at a high level.
Yeah, for sure. So this is when we start to think about logic within our Postman collection, right? So branching and looping, and all of that in Postman is controlled by this set next request method, right? So this just takes one argument, which is the name of the request that you want to run next. So in our case, it would be something to do with postcards, right? So let's say we wanted to do this, create a new postcard object. I'd copy the name of that, pass that in as a parameter here. And then it's depending on what the postcard needs, right? Let's take a look at its request body. So, it actually looks like we're putting HTML in here in order to, we can style it and make this postcard a little fancy. We might want to tailor this message, right? So if our CSV includes names and things like that, we can follow that same process that we did for the address verification. Like if we've got a name column, I could do something like this in order to dynamically have this postcard request run and include this customer's name. But I also want to control whether I actually send this postcard or not, and I don't want to waste postcards on addresses that I have that aren't deliverable, right? So I'd probably just start to extract some of what I have here to refine it, right? So I would probably create like a variable here that describes or checks whether our deliverability is good. And I would change my test a little bit to check that is deliverable is true, for example. But then I can start to go a bit more into just like regular JavaScript code. So if this postcard is deliverable, then I want to actually go and run the postcard request and tailor it and do all of that stuff. Else, maybe I saw there's this whole address thing. Maybe I want to go and delete that address that isn't verifiable. There's a bigger chance that I would probably want to try and correct it, but this is a really nice example of
that kind of works out.
Of how I can start to put together different logic in Postman based on the result of a given response and how I'm testing it and exactly what that looks like.
Yeah, I think if they, couldn't be bothered to enter the right address, they don't deserve a postcard anyway. Let's just delete their address from the database.
Yeah, maybe.
Cool, Matt. I think that is as good a stopping point as any. And this is awesome. I thank you so much. Like, just to recap, right? You came in, and this last thing that we're looking at here is, envisioning a workflow of, having a CSV file of, a bunch of contacts that you may want to send a postcard to, checking to make sure that that address is viable, and if it is, how you would go about the next request of creating the postcard, and from there you can kind of get a feel, right, from the logic we have here. If that was successful, then whatever the next step is, right? You can use this PA or Postman.setNext request to kind of control that workflow, which Matt started to get to here. So I'm going to take this off the screen for now. But yeah, I mean, I think to go from having never seen the Lob API before and not even really knowing what Lob is or could do, I think we got to a pretty cool spot. And Matt, thank you for being such a good sport and exploring that and walking us through all that.
Yeah, of course. That was fun. It kind of makes me want to go away and actually build out that workflow now, just to see how it plays. But yeah, it's always fun exploring a new API, seeing how it works, and public workspaces, in my mind anyway, make that so much easier now.
Yeah, right. Kind of like we talked about earlier on in the stream, like just going through that Explorer page in Postman and just finding a new API to explore and test out. It can be so fun. Yeah, cool stuff out there. Cool. So as we're wrapping up here, we like to do community shoutouts, Matt. So is there, not to put you on the spot, but is there anybody you'd like to call out?
Well, my whole team at the moment is working really hard on building out our demo capability for customers in order to deliver more relevant and impressive demos. So it's a lot of work to set that up in Postman, and so just a shout out to everyone in my team for all the hard work that they're doing.
So yeah, while they're doing the hard work, you're coming on having fun on the live stream, right?
I mean,
no. This is very, very helpful. Yeah. Neil says top job. Yeah, really well documented API from Lob. So kudos to Lob and that team for getting that stuff. Whenever we ran into an error, I feel like that we were able to pretty quickly kind of figure out what was going on from either the status code or the response body.
Yeah, smooth sailing, no big hurdles, so it's great.
Yeah, and I'll give my quick shout out. I'll shout out all the students and all the folks that signed up for the Student Summit this weekend. I think that's a really cool program that we have, and I love seeing the enthusiasm around that, and the folks that come to those events and contribute and speak and just consume the content and continue learning about Postman. It just helps our community continue to grow and thrive, and it makes Postman a really fun place to be. So thanks to everyone that's involved with that, and for the folks that are going to be there. So I think that's it, Matt. I think you are officially off the hook. Happy to sign off and join us next week.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.